Let me tell you, I never thought my peaceful morning by the lake would end with police lights flickering across the water. But that's exactly what happened the day Karen's voice cut through the air like a tornado full of vinegar. She was screeching at me from across the dock, waving her phone, demanding the cops, pointing that manicured finger and hollering about trespassing and theft, her precious community lake under siege by a dangerous man who wouldn't pay her invented usage fee. You know that moment when everyone freezes, waiting for you to apologize and fold? Yeah. I could feel all my neighbors just bracing for it, eyes wide, phones out, ready to witness my public shaming. But what nobody realized, not Karen, not her loyal little audience, was that I wasn't standing there in defeat. I had a century-old deed with my family's name tucked under my arm, and my calm wasn't about surrender. It was about patience, letting her dig her own hole. As the sirens got louder, Karen strutted across that dock with her clipboard like she was leading some royal parade, rattling off 27 HOA violations she'd drafted just the night before. I had to bite my cheek not to laugh at the sheer spectacle of it. This lady really believed she ran the place, that she could make an example out of me on the very shoreline where I learned to swim, to fish, to watch the sunsets with my dad and granddad. That lake. It belonged to us long before her garden gnomes ever showed up. But there she was, red-faced and righteous, demanding money, threatening me with arrest, queen of the freshwater fiefdom. Folks started gathering, some whispering, some pretending not to record all of them, waiting for the HOA president to break the quiet man in boots. She kept the performance going, said I was aggressive, hostile, intimidating, just because I refused to swipe my card for her little shakedown. The irony. She wanted money for air for just standing near water that's been in my family since my great-grandpa bought it after the war. A man who came home with nothing but grit and a stubborn belief that peace could be found right there by those rippling shores. Karen marched up and down that dock narrating her own reality to 911, saying I was polluting her ecosystem with my criminal presence, and I just stood there, arms crossed, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. More neighbors appeared, some curious, some already picking sides. Most too timid to challenge a woman so loud she drowned out common sense. When she ordered me to move my boat off her authorized territory, I ran my hand along the dock, remembering how my dad rebuilt it after a storm. This wasn't just a place, it was history. Then, right on cue, the blue and red lights washed over the scene, and Karen ran toward the cops with her arms in the air like she'd just foiled a bank robbery. She ranted about HOA regulations, claimed I was defiant and dangerous. The officers looked me over, boots posture, calm eyes, and finally asked, "What's going on here?" Before I could answer, Karen butted in again, demanding payment and removal. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I opened that weathered folder, pulled out the old deed, and waited. Karen went on about bylaws and standards, trying to sound like a lawyer until one cop asked for documentation. That's when I finally said, steady and quiet, "I'm the legal owner of this land, this lake, this whole shoreline. What she's saying, it's not true." You could feel the disbelief ripple through the crowd. Karen just laughed dry and mean, saying I was delusional, that HOA controlled every drop of water, and my claim was absurd. But when that cop read the deed, checked the stamps, traced the signatures, something shifted. Karen's bravado started to crack as the officer announced the deed predated the subdivision, that the lake was private, not under HOA control. Suddenly the phone swung my way. The crowd gasped. The officer told Karen her demands were baseless, that she couldn't charge fees on property she didn't own. For a split second, she was frozen, eyes wide, lips twitching, scrambling for some way to salvage her pride. And then just as fast, she exploded into excuses, outdated maps, zoning confusion, anything but her own arrogance. But the truth was outshining across the water, and now the crowd watched her unravel. The officers told her to back off, and she hissed at me, "This isn't over." But her voice was shaky now, her authority cracked wide open. As she stormed off, I realized This wasn't the end, just the spark that would light a much bigger fire. After the cops left, the air buzzed with whispers. Karen wasn't finished. She stalked the lake like a wolf nursing a wound, circling, glaring. I could feel her obsession growing. She needed chaos, but all I gave her was silence, and it drove her wild. The sun climbed higher, painting the lake gold, while Karen started interrogating neighbors. Who let him in? Who approved that boat? She was fishing for backup, desperate for a single ally. Nobody bit. So she taped up a notice on the community board: emergency homeowners meeting. Dangerous situation at the lake. The absurdity nearly made me laugh. All I'd done was exist on land that's mine, and she turned it into a crisis, as if the lake was about to revolt. By late afternoon, she'd lined up folding chairs at the water's edge, barking about communal property and how my claim was a threat to unity and safety. Her pressed cardigan clung to her like a badge of fake professionalism. One neighbor, quiet brave, asked, "Are you sure that's how it works?" Karen snapped back with a memorized speech about bylaws and her unique ability to interpret them. She kept glancing at me, hungry for a reaction I refused to give. That just made her escalate, storming over with a compromise. "You can use the lake under strict HOA rules and a structured fee. Consider it mercy." I waited until she finished, then told her, "I don't need your permission for my property." Her eyes bulged like I'd spoken another language. She barked that I was manipulating legal technicalities, undermining community sovereignty. Her voice rose again, drawing eyes from windows and hedges. She pointed at a lake usage sign she'd just put up, insisting it had always been there. Someone piped up, "Never seen that before." Karen insisted everyone else was just blind. The desperation in her voice was obvious now. I walked to the water, let my hand trail in the cool surface, grounding myself in memories and legacy. The water seemed to whisper the truth in contrast to her noise. Karen wasn't done. She promised the HOA board would review legal authority and might pursue formal correction. She warned that unauthorized presence could result in further action. It sounded less like a policy, more like a threat from someone scared of losing. That evening, whispers shifted, no longer fear, but curiosity. As the sun set, painting the lake orange, I sat on the dock, knowing the real battle was just beginning. Karen, somewhere nearby, was busy drafting her next move. Her obsession had finally met its match, the truth. Every desperate gesture, every dramatic speech would only pull the neighborhood deeper into her spiral as I remained grounded, the lake as my witness. Next morning, the air felt heavier, the tension a living thing. Karen launched a fresh campaign, stuffing mailboxes with notices about an internal review of community assets. She tried rebuilding her cardboard castle, spinning stories that made me a villain, her a hero. I overheard her telling folks I'd threatened lawsuits and forged documents, painting me as some aquatic mastermind plotting the downfall of public order. The more she talked, the more people blinked in confusion. She circled the lake, holding little driveway gatherings, seeking support, rewriting history to fit her script. One older neighbor mentioned always believing the lake was my family's. Karen brushed it off, blaming nostalgia, saying modern regulation overrules old sentiment. Later, she staged another meeting near the clubhouse, claiming the HOA would rectify the technical oversight that categorized the lake as private. But the crowd, once nodding, now looked skeptical. Her clipboard shook. The more she spoke, the more she contradicted herself. Sole jurisdiction, shared oversight, whatever fit the moment. Eventually, the crowd questioned her. She shouted, threatened, but the spell was broken. By evening, her voice was hoarse from trying to hold the facade together. I sat on the dock as the sun dipped, knowing the real truth: you don't need an audience when you're right. She paced her lawn, muttering about calling lawyers, convening emergency sessions, restoring authority. But it was all noise now. The lake reflected only calm, the kind that outlasts every storm. Day after day, Karen tried everything: legal threats, caution tape, cameras, official documents. She called in a lawyer, paraded him around, hoping his suit and briefcase would scare me off. But the minute he read my deed, his confidence faded. Karen, sensing things slipping, shouted even louder, reminding everyone of her authority, while her own lawyer started hedging, suggesting mediation, not dominance. That drove her nuts. Her grip on the community cracked as more folks spoke out, questioning fines, sudden rules, her right to control the lake. Each attempt to regain power only made things worse. She brought in surveyors, staged emergency assessments, accused me of every violation under the sun. Neighbors started to see it for what it was: bullying, not protection. When someone called her out, she deflected, citing future documents threatening new fines. But the crowd wasn't buying it anymore. Her dominance, built on fear, collapsed when faced with truth. Then, in a last-ditch attempt, she delivered fake cease and desist letters, hoping to scare people into compliance. I refused to play along. Eventually, the township itself got involved. Inspectors arrived, demanded records. Karen's bravado turned to panic. Neighbors began to talk openly about the fines, the intimidation, the way she'd twisted rules for her own agenda. Official notices went up further. HOA action was suspended and audit underway. Karen stood alone at the water, no longer the queen, but a pale figure, haunted by what she'd lost. The air felt lighter. Neighbors greeted each other with relief. The lake, once her weapon, now reflected only accountability and the community's new clarity. Karen hovered at a distance, her posture slumped, her presence faded. The new interim board held meetings with transparency. The cycle of control had ended. One morning, Karen approached quietly. No clipboard, no audience. She said she hadn't meant for things to spiral so far. Maybe she meant it, maybe she didn't, but it didn't matter. The truth had spoken for itself. As she drifted away, the silence left behind wasn't emptiness. It was peace. The lake returned to what it always was: a place for memory, for patience, for belonging that doesn't need to shout. So yeah, you could say justice was served not in dramatic fashion, but in quiet, relentless exposure of the truth. The community learned something real about power, about fear, about standing your ground. And now, as the sun sets across that same water, I ask you, what does justice really look like? Anyway, is it revenge, or is it the slow, steady return of peace and respect long after the noise is gone? If you've ever tangled with someone who mistook fear for authority or stood up for what's right even when the crowd doubted you, drop a comment below. Share your story. Because real justice, sometimes it's just the courage to wait out the storm. And sometimes the storm ends with nothing but silence and the truth still standing.